But before that, we're heading to Monaco ahead of this weekend's Grand Prix with Jenny Gow.
Yes, thank you, Ellie. It is delightful to be back in Monaco as ever. It's the jewel in the crown of F1. The rich and famous come out, the super yachts are lining the harbour, and the sun is finally shining down on us after rain, thunder and lightning. And because this is Monaco, we thought we'd give you the montage.
The circuit is surrounded by walls, houses, lampposts, telegraph poles, barriers, the sea, and nightclubs.
Monaco, baby! Yeah!
How you like me now?
And the flag falls for Sterling Moss to mark his third victory in the Monaco Grand Prix.
Ayrton Senna has won the Monaco Grand Prix.
It's high fives in Monaco for Jenson Button, the championship leader, whose dream season just keeps getting better and better and better.
Nico Rosberg then onto the pit straight for 2 years in a row. He is the king of Monaco.
Lewis Hamilton deserved to win this race. I have to say I do feel massively sorry for Daniel Ricciardo, because for me he was the person that built it all weekend, and due to that pit stop it went.
Save it. Nothing you can say could make that any better. Oh, the gearbox goes.
The big news, heartbreak already for the home man.
The checkered flag waits for Max Verstappen, who will cross the line first and take his fourth win of the season and extends his championship charge.
Very lovely, that. That was the real Monaco.
Good afternoon from Monte Carlo. It's glorious weather.
Oh, so many amazing Monaco moments to remember. And I'm joined by some amazing Monaco guests. What can I say? It is Harry Benjamin, our lead commentator, Andrew Benson, the BBC's F1 correspondent, and former F1 mechanic Mark Priestley. Harry, you are new to Monaco when it comes to F1. What are your first impressions?
Well, you know, the weather's been a bit
you're already laid
iffy.
back.
I've
You've
had
got
to
the
go on a
Monaco
mega
vibe.
yacht as well. That was a bit, a bit of a trek. Had to get a little boat out there as well and have a little look around the hot tub and all that.
How big was your yacht?
It was gigantic. Not the biggest one in the harbour, but
Can you point it out?
It's overlooking the Nouvelle Chicane, so it's a little bit. At the moment, we're on the top of the Red Bull Energy Station, which has a great view of Rascasse. So it's a little bit sort of behind us. But
Can I just say, it's not Harry's yacht?
no, it's not my yacht. Can you imagine? Could you imagine?
Well,
That'd be great,
we know
wouldn't it?
what company you keep. You might well have a yacht. You got a helicopter here, didn't you? Oh no, that was a train.
But you should get the helicopter in off peak, because it's not too much more expensive than getting a taxi.
I have taken the helicopter from Nice Airport once.
Oh, yeah. How was it?
Yeah, it was like a helicopter ride along the Côte d'Azur. Well, can't complain.
It's a lot quicker than a taxi, isn't it? I've done it. It's brilliant. But the price goes through the roof on Grand Prix weekend, like everything else, doesn't it? So it becomes unsustainable.
I haven't done that. I feel like I'm missing
Jenny.
out.
Yeah, maybe on the way home.
I've never done it. I mean, for honestly, this is I have been to Monaco before, but this is my first time here for Formula One, and it is a magnificent scene. You know, I'm looking directly at Rascasse, and then you can see the pit lane getting set up as well, and it's a really tight and small pit lane here. All the mechanics and engineers are actually seated inside rather than on the traditional pit wall, because there is no room for one. The sun is just starting to peek out from the clouds. We have had 4 seasons in one day. The rain absolutely pummeled down earlier. But it's been lovely so far, in all honesty. I can't deny. I just hope that we do get a bit of mixed weather for the action later on in the weekend.
We've had all of the weather today. We've had sunshine, we've had torrential rain, we've had thunder and lightning. At the moment, they're actually just mopping up the Red Bull Energy Station where we are positioned at the top of it. There is another level, but I think that's the VIP level. We're not going up there. But at the moment, they're fishing rubber ducks out the Red Bull swimming pool. I mean, to call it a swimming pool doesn't feel like it's just, but it's about
more of a large bath,
5
Jenny,
meters.
isn't it? But,
You have a very large bath in your house. It's about 5 meters by 2 meters, but that is where Max Verstappen will be hoping that he has another win and jumps into, because that's kind of tradition.
They've had some iconic moments, haven't they? Drivers leaping into that pool on a Sunday evening after a good weekend. So, yeah, I mean, they'll be hoping for the same thing. But, interestingly now, we've got more than Red Bull, I think, in a fight.
I know, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
We'll get to that. Don't move the story on too soon, Mark, because I want to know should we leave Mark's favourite Monaco story until the end, or is it okay to go now? Is it X-rated?
Well, you want me to choose a broadcastable one then? Okay.
Yes,
I mean,
don't choose
Give me
one
5 minutes then.
because
I'll come back to you.
Daft. No, go.
Really? Okay, well, I've got lots, because actually from a racing perspective, I've been very lucky that my time at McLaren, we've had some successful times here. So my very first ever race win that I was involved with was right here around the streets with David Coulthard. That was an amazing weekend. Had some great ones with Kimi, and the thing about a race weekend where you win with Kimi is you can probably imagine what I'm going to say next.
Carnage?
It turns into an absolute mess on a Sunday evening. And in Monaco, that's easy to do. Hopping across boats to another boat and not seeing the light of day.
Boats, as Kimi's done in the past.
You've seen the YouTube videos. There is evidence littered around the world of a night out with Kimi. We've had some good ones here. But actually, do you know what I will say is my favourite or most significant memory? People will remember that sort of infamous year, 2007, when I was here with Lewis Hamilton in his rookie year, Fernando Alonso, the teammate. It was here around the streets of Monaco where that whole thing really started to unravel and fall apart, because that was the weekend when Lewis, for the very first time really, was as quick, if not quicker, than Fernando. And we as a team were way ahead of anybody around this track. We had about a minute gap from anyone behind, our 2 cars in front. The team were on the radio to tell Lewis to back off from Fernando because we just wanted to get the cars home. Fernando was on the radio screaming to tell Lewis to back off, and Lewis was on the radio going, let me past, I can win this. In the end, it had to be Ron Dennis to come in, which is very rare and unusual, step in and get on the radio himself and give them both a good telling off and say, stay where you are, we just want to get to the end.
Crikey. I would have loved to be in your position, to be a fly on the wall when that all started to kick off. It was a privilege, and I'm sure you think back to all those days that you've had with the teams, with victories and wins. That is it a privilege? Do you see that at the time?
Privilege. Yeah, I will never ever take for granted the experiences that I mean, we all have it now. Look at us, we're all sat here on the top of the Red Bull Energy Station in the middle of Monaco's harbour. That's an unbelievable privilege itself. But yeah, I've been lucky enough with the team to be on the inside of some of these great big moments that fans talk about, that newspapers write about, you know, and we've been in the heart of that. So it's been great. Loved it.
Do you know what? Sharing those moments as well is one of the things that I absolutely adore. And my favourite memory of coming here was when I think the DJ has just kicked in with some music. It sounds a bit more evening-y now.
Andrew, sit down. We're not dancing yet. Sit down.
Yeah, so the first time I came here with Jolyon Palmer, and obviously he'd raced around the streets, but he'd never actually seen racing around the streets when it came to F1 because he was always driving. Harry, put the lid away.
Sorry.
So I very luckily got to take him down to Dabac, and he was absolutely blown away by the speed, by the closeness. I mean, obviously if you're a driver, you know how fast an F1 car can go, but actually seeing it and seeing how close they get to the barrier, he was in heaven, and it was really nice for me to be able to share that moment with him, and I will always remember it. Yeah. Andrew Benson.
So, I mean, Jolyon's right. Watching a Formula One car around Monaco is probably the most spectacular sight, certainly in Formula One, and possibly one of the most in sport, because what they do around here between the barriers, when you see that for the first time, it really does blow your mind, whether it's the sort of oral assault in the tunnel, with the noise reverberating off the walls, whether it's standing down at the swimming pool 1 and 2, actually is the first 2 corners in the swimming pool is actually my favourite part of the track to watch, or walking up to Casino Square. Back in the day I used to walk the entire track on the Thursday, stop for lunch around the corner from Casino,
that sounds
between
nice.
the 2 sessions, and then carry on around the rest of the lap. Well, you may well ask Harry. A long story. Anyway, but yeah, there's nowhere like it. My first race here was 1994, which was the weekend after Imola. And of course, that was a harrowing weekend because it started with Carl Wendlinger crashing at the chicane and ending up in a coma for 19 days. It was the first time I met Adrian Newey, who was the chief designer of Williams at the time, having a pretty brutal time. Max Mosley changed the rules overnight because of the Wendlinger accident, the FIA president. It was quite an introduction to Formula One, so that would take some topping in terms of my memories of Monaco.
It also has changed an awful lot over those years. You're just talking about some of the old days. It's massively different now when you really think about it. We didn't even have a pit lane with garages. When I first started, there weren't full garages. They had a little sort of shed that you could half reverse your car in. Couldn't even fit a whole car in. The front end was sticking out, so if it rained, it got wet. And that was it. And now look at it, we've got this amazing setup up there which has got hospitality and everything.
And yet what's great about it is that the circuit's hardly changed for 100 years.
Yeah.
The one bit that has the Nouvelle chicane on the harbour front is called Nouvelle because it's much tighter than it used to be until 1986, I think it was changed. And then the stretch behind us from Tabac, as you were talking about, through the swimming pool didn't exist when Monaco first started. That was introduced in the 70s. Before that, it was a run straight down from Tabac to a hairpin and then back up the pit straight again. Apart from that, the circuit's exactly the same as it was 100 years ago when the race first started. So that's one of the reasons why it's so special, so evocative around here.
Unfortunately, the cars have gotten bigger.
They have. Lewis Hamilton was talking about that today as well. He said when he first came here, he knew he wanted to A, live here, B, race here, and he's done both of them, and he still has that excitement of Monaco and what it brings to a driver.
But you know what? I mean, the drivers were saying that today, the cars have got bigger, but also they were saying it's always been like this at Monaco. You've never been able to overtake. It doesn't matter how big the cars are, whether they're 180 centimetres wide or 2 metres wide or 2 metres 10 wide as they were in the early 90s, a bit shorter than they are now, long like they are now. Doesn't matter, you still could never overtake in Monaco. Just ask David Coulthard. It wasn't the same year, I think it was the year after the one you were talking about, Mark. He spent, I think it was like 60 laps behind Enrique Bernoldi's arrows because he couldn't get past it.
Yeah, it's true. It has always been the same. And I actually don't mind that. A lot of people will say, well, we need to change things because that's what racing is supposed to be. It should be overtake. I get all of that. But I love Monaco. I think it should be here on the calendar because it offers a different challenge. Saturday is where it's all about here. Qualifying is everything. And to see those cars on the absolute limit, which we will get to see on Saturday, around these streets on a circuit that hasn't changed all that time, I think it's magical. So, it's a different set of challenges here to other races, but I think we should have that in a long season.
Yeah, I think that Saturday is so special. It's one of my favourite parts of the season when you see those drivers absolutely on the limit and sometimes over the limit. And the whole weekend can be made or broken in just those few moments at the end of qualifying. And if they get pole, you're almost, you have the advantage for the weekend going into it. And that is the good thing about this weekend. We have 3 teams who could easily get pole. And I think that's a privilege and it's exciting. And Harry, remind us of what's happened, why it's all changed.
Well, it looks like Red Bull are having to look over their shoulder a little bit because McLaren, having brought in upgrades in the last couple of rounds, have made a great leap forward in pace. But also Ferrari are there nip and tuck too. They had a big upgrade last time out in Imola. And although Verstappen went and won the race in Italy, less than a second covered him and Lando Norris right at the end. And the weekend was far from smooth for Red Bull and Verstappen. On the Friday of the weekend, they were genuinely on the back foot. Sebastian Buemi, their reserve and sim driver, put in an 11-hour stint back in Milton Keynes to try and turn around the team's fortunes. And of course, Verstappen, with a little sprinkling of his own magic, and plus a tow from Hülkenberg, was able to then put it on pole. But
my son referenced that when I'm telling him off, saying, "Get off the gaming. You've spent too long on the gaming." He says, "Yeah, but Sebastian Buemi did 11 hours and they won the Grand Prix." So I'm like, can I argue with that?
Hard work pays off. But I think what it told us is that actually, at the start of this season, the first couple of rounds, look, we were all guilty of it, right? We thought this is going to be another Verstappen-dominated season. He may well win every single race. And I think I'm genuinely excited now that, okay, he might well set it on pole position here and he'd probably go on and win the race if he starts from there. But there is a genuine fight to be had for pole position and for the race between 3 teams. I think we are at that stage now. I don't think we're dreaming with that at the moment.
No, I mean, I think we've got to a point now in Formula One where it does look like each race weekend Red Bull have a threat from somebody, and it's become McLaren in the last 2 races. Charles Leclerc, the Ferrari driver, we're all expecting to be in the fight for pole this weekend because he's taken 2 poles out of the last 3 here. He's rather good around the streets of his hometown. He was trying to pour a bit of cold water on the threat to Red Bull story, saying it might be circuit specific. I don't want to get too carried away. I don't want to be a downer. But so we do have to. So it does rather look like the championship is Verstappen's still, because let's not forget, he has won 5 of the first 7 races. Yeah.
I wonder though, could the Constructors' Championship be slightly under pressure if Perez continues the performances that he had in Imola, and you've got 2 McLarens, 2 Ferraris consistently scoring big points?
I think the good thing, Harry, is that we can at least ask the question, right? Which through most of last year,
and even that is a massive relief, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There's some genuine competitive jeopardy in Formula One again, thankfully. For everyone who's not biased in favour of Red Bull.
Stay tuned.
I think also with this particular circuit and this weekend, even though there are still differences between those 3 cars, and if you put them on traditional circuits, probably on some weekends one will be quicker than the other. Around here, they're kind of evened out a little bit. It's not all about outright power. There's a lot of what, you're getting the best out of your car around here is all down to, is your driver in the right headspace? Is he in the groove? Has he built up a rhythm? Has he had a clean weekend, from practice all the way through? Those things make all the difference. And the teams actually put more effort into giving their drivers that sort of consistent build-up through the weekend, clean laps, high fuel runs so they can just keep going. Much more than at a normal circuit where you'd be going for all-out, flat-out runs at certain points. So the driver makes a massive difference around here, more than the car does. And that, I think, is interesting. When we've got 3 cars that are very close, the drivers can be the ones that make the difference.
So, Harry, who do you think has a realistic chance of putting it on pole this weekend?
I genuinely think Charles Leclerc has a great chance of putting on pole position. I genuinely think Max Verstappen has a great chance of putting on pole position. And I actually believe that both McLarens have a shot at putting it on pole position. Oscar Piastri, let's not forget, would have started on the front row in Imola were it not for a grid penalty. If the start had played out differently, Piastri could have won an Imola last time out, and he's got the full upgrade now. He's right there with Norris. That's what I believe the state of play is, and that's I can't believe I'm saying that.
Sainz and Perez, are you ruling them out?
I don't think you can rule anybody out. I think it's that close. As I say, it can come down to the little nuances of if a driver has an accident at the start of FP1, that can throw them off. No matter how good they are, that can throw them off balance, if you like, for the rest of the weekend. If you have a car failure in that first session, it just interrupts your rhythm. And those things make such a difference. So I agree with Harry. Any of the drivers that you've just talked about, and including the 2 you've just mentioned, it could be on pole. And we haven't been able to say that for so long. It's so nice to be talking in that way.
Well, I caught up with Lando Norris earlier, obviously talking about his win. Everyone's still talking about that, and talking about what it feels like to come into a weekend and know that you have a chance.
I don't know, it's weird because as much as it feels like it makes you feel good because you can fight for podiums and wins, and that's something you really love. It doesn't change anything from inside. Really, you just go out. I've always tried to do the best job I can. I always try and deliver a pole lap or the best lap I can. So the way I approach things, the way I think about things, doesn't change. Whether I'm going to try and be first or whether I'm going to be 5th or 10th, So when I'm behind the wheel, it's just the same job. It's just fighting for a higher position, and that always means more. It always means a little bit more pressure. But as long as you deal with that in the right way, it's just it's another weekend at the racetrack.
I mean, it is McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull all fighting and all challenging. It's great for us to know that there are 3 teams challenging and in it. Does that make it more complicated for you or more exciting for you?
Exciting, I think. I mean, you're talking about people who are the best at what they do. So it's always tricky, it's always exciting. I mean, we've been fighting teams for a long time. Red Bull are the ones who haven't been fighting teams for a long time.
That's true.
I hope that we can try and take advantage of that, but at the same time, the teams have been doing a great job all season with strategy and with all of these decision-making things. So, no, I'm confident we can keep it up. It's a very different track, so Monaco is a bit of an outlier with all of these types of things. But yeah, just excited to get back on track, especially when it's raining like this. So, a bit horrible, but I look forward to it no matter what.
I found it interesting listening and speaking with Lando. He seems very relaxed, Andrew. He's taking it all in his stride, isn't he? He's almost like it was bound to happen at some point, and now it has. It's great. He can move on.
He's a very relaxed kind of character, isn't he?
Just like you.
He was also saying that, someone was asking him, has it changed his approach? He said, well, no, because whether you're 20th or first, you're still trying to do the best lap that you can. And he admitted that it adds pressure to the team. But what an incredible job McLaren have done to turn it around. Let's not forget, in Monaco last year, they were towards the back of the grid. They had one of their worst, the start of last season was terrible, and then they brought this. Now it's like a hackneyed old story now, but this upgrade in Austria and then another upgrade in Singapore. They were the second fastest car for a lot of last season. They started this year a little bit slower than they expected, but they've now jumped right to the front with this latest upgrade. There's more to come. So, it's changed so much. Norris was even asked today whether he thought he could challenge for the championship. He pointed out he was 60 points behind Verstappen. So
never say never.
But he didn't rule it out as well. That was the interesting thing. He said, well, we've got more things coming, maybe we can turn things around.
Do you know what's changed with Lando is that win? And it sounds sort of flippant to say that, but Lando as a character, we know how talented he's always been, but he's also been a character that's quite self-critical. I don't think he sort of has always been full of his own self-belief. You often hear him criticising himself quite harshly after some of his earlier races. Well, now he's won, and he's proved to himself he can win, so his own self-confidence, his own self-belief is now at a much higher level, and that means he comes into a weekend with that built into him. He's got that self-belief. He knows he can do it, so why can't he go and do it again?
Just watching, actually, Max Verstappen downstairs just milling around with some of his press people. He seems very relaxed, but there is more pressure on Red Bull. Max has had it his own way for quite a long time now. Do you think, Harry, that will change Red Bull's approach? That they're not as high and as far ahead of the chasing pack?
I don't think it will. I think Red Bull have been fighters for championships for many years, and so has Verstappen. I think they'll relish the chance to fight other teams, and Verstappen being the character he is, I think he'll thrive, and it might even elevate what is already a pristine performance of driver. I have no doubt that they'll be able to manage this kind of fight, but it does bode well. I realise that Norris is obviously very far back in the championship in terms of being a contender, but as we get closer to 2026, which is a big power unit change in regulation, it brings an end to this kind of regulation cycle we're in at the moment. We'll continue with ground effects and Venturi cars, but as we get closer to 2026, things will naturally just start to tighten up. And I wonder if now that McLaren have made the jump, Ferrari look like they're in it. Lewis Hamilton was saying earlier as well, he takes a lot of heart from seeing McLaren and their race. They can do something like that at Mercedes. And naturally, I think that will happen as we gear towards 2025, 2026. So I think stick with it. Formula One was a tough sell a few weeks ago, a few months ago. I don't think it is anymore.
Yeah, and I think because we've got this jump from McLaren and a potential jump from Ferrari, which we haven't really seen the full effect of yet, it is going to come down to who's got the sort of the wherewithal to keep developing. Each development, if you can bring more pace to your car as the season goes, you could jump from 6th to 1st with only by bringing a 10th. So that's a real interesting side of the story over the course of the rest of this year and into next.
Another thing as well is strategy in race scenarios. Look, we haven't seen what Perez has got. Imola might well have been a little bit of a blip from him, we don't know. But based on previous, in race scenarios where perhaps Verstappen now does not have this huge pace advantage, he could be the Red Bull that is out there on his own, and they don't have a second car to help play with the strategy, whereas more consistently you're likely to see a single Max Verstappen versus 2 McLarens versus 2 Ferraris. They've got more to play with. That is where Red Bull could come unstuck going forward.
Does that mean, I hate to say this because I think it's just about to come up here and do some filming with the team, quietly. So I'll say it quietly. Is Perez in trouble?
She's only gone and said it.
Is he going to lose his seat? Because, as you say, he could be the 6th fastest car on track in what should be the 2nd fastest.
Problem is they don't have a lot of choices to replace him with. Most of the big names have already signed contracts. Most of the second rank of drivers have already signed contracts. Carlos Sainz is available because Lewis Hamilton's going to Ferrari next year, but the word is that Red Bull don't really want him. There was tension between Verstappen and Sainz when they were teammates at Toro Rosso back in 2015 when they were both rookies. So it's almost like he might keep the seat by default.
It's a fascinating driver market, sorry Jenny, isn't it? Because we've got this movement all kicked off by the early move from Lewis, but also we've got, as you said, Harry, we've got this massive regulation change on the horizon in 26. So if you are going to change drivers at the end of this year, you've got to kind of think slightly longer term. So you're not thinking about putting a driver in for one season in 25 and then go for the big change where you might have to change driver again. So you've got to start thinking differently this time around than you might have had to in other seasons because of the massive regulation change.
Just to come back to what Andrew said about, Perez might keep the seat by default, and there might be tension between Sainz and Verstappen, and that may be the reason Sainz doesn't come to Red Bull. Won't be any tension if Verstappen isn't in a Red Bull next year. Just leaving that there.
So what Harry's referring to there is Mercedes are trying to get Verstappen, and it doesn't, on the face of it, it doesn't look like they'd be very tempting because he's dominating with Red Bull and Mercedes are really struggling this year, as they have been for the last 2 years. But obviously things are unsettled at Red Bull at the moment following the allegations that a female employee made against Christian Horner in terms of sexual harassment and coercive controlling behaviour, which he denies. Adrian Newey's already left, the chief technical officer, and Verstappen's unsettled as well. His dad had said, Jos Verstappen, the former F1 driver, said back in Bahrain in the first race that the team would be torn apart if Horner didn't leave. Horner hasn't left. Verstappen's still here for now, so this is why Toto Wolff thinks he can get Verstappen. It doesn't look like it's going to be for next year, but there seems to be a real possibility that Verstappen could go from Red Bull for 2026. We don't know that he will, but it is a possibility.
I mean, the problem is, for any driver or team member looking to move positions now, you have no idea who's going to come out in 26 with a good car. I mean, the form book almost goes out the window because it's such a massive change. The biggest change in regulations I think the sport's ever had, really. So it's a gamble to some extent. If you think back to when Lewis left us at McLaren and went to Mercedes, it was all done on the kind of promises that he was told, that, what was going on behind the scenes, how they were approaching the regulation changes. And those will be the conversations that are happening right now. Same conversations that will be trying to attract Adrian Newey to a team as they are trying to attract big drivers. What can you promise somebody for 2026 without having any real evidence to back it up? So maybe with Mercedes, even though the form book right now says they're not in the top 3 teams, maybe for 26 they've got something bubbling away in the background that might just be tempting.
It's just a totally fascinating time in F1, and it's come almost out of nowhere. We'll see what happens, and we will of course keep you up to date. But as Sergio Perez comes up, I think we've dodged that quite nicely. Poll predictions, please. We don't normally do predictions, but actually I think here, because of the situation, and the sun is shining now on us, but there's been rain earlier, I would like to hear who you think will put it on poll. Harry, let's start with you.
Charles Leclerc for Ferrari is my tip for poll.
Mark?
Oscar Piastri.
Ooh.
Left field, I know.
Andrew?
I'm going to go for Leclerc as well, I think. And for him to finally deliver on the win that he's deserved here, deserve is an awkward word, but it looked like he was going to get a few years in a row, and didn't quite happen for various reasons. Let's go Leclerc.
I'm going to go Norris. I have a feeling this weekend.
But the fact, how brilliant the fact that we've gone for different people that aren't Verstappen.
I mean, the obvious answer would be Verstappen.
Yeah, of course it will. And it will be the most dominant Grand Prix we've had all year, won't it?
And even if he's not on pole, the chances are he'll probably win it anyway. But stay tuned, really, it'll be fun. We've got all the coverage across the weekend, especially keep your eyes out for qualifying, because that will be electric, and we do have the chance of rain again, I think. My thanks to Harry, to Andrew, to Mark. Next up it's the news, and after that Ellie is back with the path to Paris.
This is